chapter 17. It's a long chapter. As children, we so enjoy this chapter of where we have David and Goliath. I'm going to zero in, though, on David, having got up early in the morning, left the sheep with a keeper, had some cheeses, had some bread. He was going to go and give them to the captain of the 50, where his brothers were. So he comes to his to where the battle is in the 28th verse. I want to look at Eliab. Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, Why comest thou down hither? With whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride, the naughtiness of thine heart. For thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. And David said, What have I done? Is there not a cause? I thought of this struggle between Eliab and David. But you know what I really enjoy? Let's turn over to 1 Chronicles chapter 27 for a moment here. 1 Chronicles 27. And as we go through this chapter, there's a list of David's princes, there's a list of his judges, there's a list of his porters, his officers in the previous chapter, whole list of these. But then we come to the rulers of the tribes, verse 16. Furthermore, over the tribes of Israel, the ruler of the Reubenites was Eleazar the son of Zichri, and of the Simeonites, Shephatiah the son of Maacah, of the Levites, Hashabiah the son of Kemuel, of the Aaronites, Zadok, of Judah, Elihu. Look at your marginal reading. It's Eliab. What I really enjoy about this is that David did not hold a grudge. You know, we spoke a little bit about that this morning. Some of the brothers spoke about a root of bitterness. I've seen more damage done by a root of bitterness among young people than almost anything else. Do you have that in your heart, young person, about something that someone has said to you? Maybe you said something to someone else. Maybe it hasn't been received too well. Do you have a grudge? You know, I love, Cindy and I spent some time in Florida, and a number of years ago, we went down, and it was right after our brother Ralph Erisman had moved from Florida back up to Chicago. He was getting weak, and his family thought maybe he should come back to where some of his family was. And I had enjoyed very much our brother Ralph's ministry. The brethren there had very much enjoyed his ministry. And we arrived there this one start of the winter, and Ralph's not there. And a sister from here, tell you who it was Celia Funk. She said, You know, Dave, you know what we missed the most about Ralph? He was a man that remembered nobody's faults. A man that remembered nobody's faults. Imagine that listed beside your name. If the Lord takes you home. That's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's a man that didn't hold a grudge. You know, we find that David didn't hold a grudge here against his brother, even though there were some difficulties. You know, I was speaking about a root of bitterness actually before the meeting with our brother Radu, somewhere around here. There's our brother Radu over there. He quoted something from his grandfather, which I appreciated. He said, You know, brother, he said, I learned this from my father who got it from his father, which would be his grandfather. He said, a root of bitterness is like watching someone on fire and going over, and instead of throwing water on it, you throw gas on it. I appreciated that. Oh, it's an area that destroys so many young people. So many young people, a root of bitterness. We're going to have to move on now. My wife said to me before yesterday, she said, Dave, she said, honey, Don't try to pack too much in. Let's move on. So we have here Eliab, and now I want to go to 2 Samuel 16. 2 Samuel 16. We have a man here by the name of Shimei. We'll read part of it. 2 Samuel 16, verse 5. When the king David came to Bahurim, behold, thence came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. He came forth, and he cursed still as he came. And he cast stones at David, and at all the servants of David. And all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. And thus said Shimei when he cursed, Come out, thou bloody man, thou man of Belial. The Lord hath returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead thou hast reigned. And the Lord hath delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom thy son, and behold, thou art taken in thy mischief, because thou art a bloody man. Then said Abishai the son of Zeruiah the king, Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, I pray thee, and take off his head. And the king said, What have I to do with you, ye sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse, because the Lord hath said unto him, Curse David. Who then? What shall then say, Wherefore hast thou done so? And David said to Abishai and to all the servants, Behold, my son, which came forth out of my bowels, seeketh my life. How much more now may this Benjamite do it? Let him alone, and let him curse, for the Lord hath bidden him. It may be that the Lord will look on my affliction, and the Lord will requite me good for his cursing. And David and his men went by the way, and Shimei went along on the hillside over against him, and cursed as he went, and threw stones at him and dust. And the king and all the people that were with him were weary, and refreshed themselves there. Turn over now to 2 Samuel, and I want to look at maybe someone can help me. I'm looking for the place where Shimei says he's sorry. Thank you. 19 and 16. 2 Samuel 19 and 16. And Shimei the son of Gera, Benjamite, which was of Bahurim, hasted and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. And there were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him, and Ziba the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons and his 20 servants with him. They went over Jordan before the king, and there went over a ferry boat to carry over the king's household, and to do what he thought good. And Shimei the son of Gera fell down before the king as he was come over Jordan, and said unto the king, Let not my lord impute iniquity unto me, neither do thou remember that which thy servant did perversely the day that my lord the king went out of Jerusalem, and the king should take it to his heart. For thy servant doth know that I have sinned. Therefore, behold, I am come first this day of all the house of Joseph, and go down to meet my lord the king. Well, we have a discourse. Abishai says, Hey, you can't be let off that easy. And David says, What have I to do with you, ye sons of Zeruiah? And he mentions that he's therefore the king of Israel. Therefore the king said unto Shimei, Thou shalt not die. And the king sware unto him. To me, Shimei is a sad story, because when we get to the next book in 1 Kings, we know that David he gives some business to his son Solomon to tidy up, and one of them is Shimei. But just prior to that, you look at, as we read, of one of the sons of David that wants that chair that I was speaking of, one of David's sons, Adonijah. We have a list of those that went with Adonijah, and then we have a list of those that didn't go. And one of them is Shimei. I always felt bad the way Shimei ended. But, the government of God carries on. And we know that Shimei, he lost his life. But at least we see here that he comes to David. He says, I've sinned. I've thought about that a lot. I'm standing before you, young person, as someone that is not a young person anymore. I'm not a middle-aged person. I'm beyond that. I was visiting with a brother just this week. We had lunch together. We were at a funeral, and we had lunch together. And I reminded this brother of something that he told me 2 years ago, and I told him that I had just shared it in the assembly 2 weeks before. And he said, "Oh, what's that?" He said, "I'll tell you what it was." This brother, he told me 2 years previous, and he's my senior by 5 years. He said, "You know, Dave, I've been looking back in my past life, and there's been things in my past life that I just wish I hadn't done. And there's things in my and I'm not," he said, "I'm not talking about wicked things. I'm just talking about a behavior as a Christian." He said, "I'll give you an example." He said, "I was a good water skier." He said, "I was being pulled by someone, and I'm on a slalom ski, and we're going down the lake, and off in the distance, there's a dock." And we knew what the dock was. It was full of people. One of the brethren had an event, and all the people that were visiting with him, they came down to the dock. There was a whole dock full of people. And the man driving the boat, he gave a signal to me that was water skiing, and we veered over to the dock, and everybody in the dock knew what was coming, so they all cleared off the dock, except for one elderly sister. She was a big woman, and she couldn't move fast. And he said, "I came in, and just 5 feet before the dock, I cut really hard, and I sent up a wall of water, and I just soaked her." And everybody laughs, and I laughed, and the guy driving the boat laughed, and we laughed about it after. But he said, "I'm older now." And I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking, how much of a Christian act was that? Well, this sister, who was old enough to be my mother, she's home with the Lord. So I couldn't go to her, but her daughters are alive. So I went to her 2 daughters, and I told her the story. And I said to her 2 daughters, "I'm sorry for what I did. I feel really badly for what I did." I really believe that repentance in our life, and it's not my subject to take up repentance and restoration, we've done that another time, but repentance in our life, it carries on. And I tell that story, young person, in your youth, when there is the tendency to do things and to say things that you think are funny, think about down the road how you might look at it as I look at it now, and as this brother looks at it. I love this with Shimei. He came to David. He said he was sorry. He didn't end well. But I love it with this brother who, in his latter days, is seeking to mend that which was a problem in his past life. We're not talking about downright evil. The broad road has 2 sides to it. It's got a filthy, dirty side. It's got a very, very clean side. But as believers, oh, young person, don't do something, don't say something that you're going to regret if the Lord leaves us here later on. Let's go on to 1 Samuel. We're going to back now to 1 Samuel chapter 21. 1 Samuel chapter 21. This takes place earlier. David has just started to be in his rejection. He's running from Saul. He comes to this place, Nob, 1 Samuel 21. And the first verse, "Then came David to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? And David said unto Ahimelech the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and said unto me, Let no man know of anything of the business whereof I have sent thee, and what I have commanded thee. And I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. Now therefore, what is under thine hand, give me 5 loaves of bread in mine hand, or what is there present? And the priest answered and said, priest answered David and said, There's no common bread under mine hand, but there's hallowed bread. It's this statement I want to zero in on. If the young men have kept themselves at least from women. And David answered the priest and said unto him, Of a truth, women have been kept from us these 3 days since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy. I was troubled a short while ago. A young person came to me, and he was troubled. He was just recently married. He's a warm, friendly type, has a big world, a lot of friends. He said, Brother, I did a survey, and I want to share it with you. I said, Oh? He said, the survey was this. I did a survey of 30 of my peers, young men. And I asked them if, in the past or in the present, they have had a problem with pornography. And he said the response I got, out of the 30, 28 of them said it was a struggle for them. And he said the other 2, I don't think they were telling me the truth. I'm not going to flog this subject. It's real. When I was a young person, to get into the world, I had to get up out of bed, have my breakfast, leave the house, and then I was in the world. Now, we reach over, we pick up our phone, and we have the whole world in our hands. Verse 5, Of a truth, women have been kept from us these 3 days since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy. I just make this statement, dear young person, young men, young women, keep your vessels pure. Keep your vessel holy. As I said, I'm not going to flog this subject. Let's go on to the next one. Next one is in 1 Samuel, the 20th chapter. Let's go back. David and Jonathan are both upset. David has had a javelin cast at him twice. Jonathan has had a javelin cast at him. Saul was angry. Jonathan was furious. Jonathan and David had this pact that they were going to go out in the field. Jonathan was going to shoot some arrows. If they were to go beyond this rock or in front of this rock, it would be a communication between David and Jonathan. But there's a young lad here. Let's read verse 35. It came to pass in the morning that Jonathan went out in the field at the time appointed with David, and a little lad with him. And he said unto his lad, Run, find out the arrows which I shoot. As the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. When the lad was come to the place of the arrow which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried after the lad and said, Is not the arrow behind thee? Jonathan cried after the lad, Make speed, haste, stay not. Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrows and came to his master, but the lad knew not anything, only Jonathan, and David knew the matter. And Jonathan gave his artillery unto his lad and said unto him, Go, carry them into the city. I appreciated our brother Dave Penfield when he gave thanks for the food the other day. He made the comment that none of us here today are here by accident. Every one of us is here purposefully. And young person, you're here this afternoon, you're here at these meetings. If there is one thing that is said in these meetings, if there is one thing that is said this afternoon in this meeting, just one thing that touches you, it's worth it. We have here, they came into the field, verse 35, at the time appointed. That's quite a statement. I challenge you to look that statement up throughout the Word. It's numerous times. We have it very early on. Seth. Eve gave birth to Seth, and Seth's name means appointed. You remember in the 24th of Genesis, the servant. He's speaking to the Lord, and he cries to the Lord, and he pleads with the Lord that the one that he comes in contact is the one that is appointed for Isaac. A lot of young people here, some of you, it is appointed for you to be married. Some of you, it is appointed for you not to be married. And you need to be happy with the portion that is yours, and to realize that all our appointments are of God. Job says in his book, the night seasons are appointed. The struggles that we have are appointed. The good times, the bad times, they're appointments. Oh, young person, for you to realize that which crosses your pathway, whatever it is, it's appointed. And to be able to realize it from the hand of God. We had a brother read from 2 Corinthians, didn't we? 2 Corinthians chapter 4. If we could get a hold of this, the verse that was read I'm not sure, was at the end of the prayer meeting? In 2 Corinthians 4, verse 18, while we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen, for the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. Mr. Darby makes a very interesting comment with regards to that. He says, things unseen are more real to a believer than things seen, because things seen bring with them a deception. I'll repeat that. Things unseen are more real to a believer than things seen, because things seen bring with them a deception. Oh, dear young people, recognize that which crosses your pathway is indeed appointed. Let's move on to 1 Samuel. I guess we'll go over a few chapters. We're having to skip a few of these pieces of paper. I don't have pieces of paper up here, but as it were, 1 Samuel 26. Let's look at the 21st verse. You know the story. We spoke about the previous chapter with a sweet person like Abigail, and having been linked up with someone like Nabal. But if you notice in the 26th chapter that David comes upon Saul. And if I could put it this way, Abigail saved Saul's life. You say that's an interesting statement. But if you could just picture David coming down the mountainside with 400 men, his swords drawn, he's going to do business with Nabal's household, he's going to wipe them out. And Abigail comes and stands in the way. And at the end of the story, read it yourself, David is so thankful that he was spared from shedding innocent blood. And I dare say, if that had not happened, and we have this chapter, and David was standing in front of Saul, with the opportunity to take his life, he perhaps would have. We don't know that. But we know that the event of Abigail stopping him from shedding innocent blood happened just before that. But we find here that David, he takes Saul's water bottle, he takes his sword. And what does it say? 17th verse, Saul knew David's voice. Is this thy voice, my son David? David said, Is my voice, my lord, O king? And he said, Wherefore doth my lord thus pursue after his servant? For what have I done? What evil is in mine hand? Now therefore, I pray thee, let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord have stirred thee up against me, let him accept an offering. But if they be the children of men, cursed be they before the Lord. For they have driven me out this day from abiding in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, Go and serve other gods. Well, Saul responds in the 21st verse, I have sinned. You know, we have Saul, he makes that statement 3 times. He says, I've sinned. He says it twice to Samuel, or twice to David, and once to Samuel. Never says it to the Lord. I have sinned. Return, my son David. I will no more do thee harm, because my soul was precious in thine eyes this day. Behold, I have played the fool. I have erred exceedingly. And David answered and said, Behold the king's spear. Let one of the young men come over and fetch it. You know, I've pondered that. I've pondered this young man, because if you go back to when the people of God wanted a king, Samuel was very, very clear in telling the people what the king would do. He says he's going to take your young women. He said he's going to take your young men. He says he's going to take your goodliest young men. This is one of them. Here's one of the goodliest young men that Saul has taken to himself. And David says to Saul, send one of the young men. You know, David took 3 things from Saul. It would really be the blue border of his garment, the ribbon of blue on the border of his garment. And he took his water bottle and he took his spear. The only thing that David gave back was his spear. He didn't give the water bottle back or the ribbon of blue. You'd think it'd be the other way around. But he gave him his spear back. But think of this young man. Think of the position he's in. And he's faced with a choice. He's going to go and get this spear. Here's a choice. Is he going to link up with David, who is the rightful king in rejection, or is he going to be obedient to his master? And you know, young people, sometimes we find ourselves faced with a decision, and we don't know what to do. We don't know which way to go. Either both roads seem wrong, or both roads seem right, and we're happy to take whichever road it is if we only knew what the Lord's mind was. We have no agenda in the matter. We just don't know. And I'm sure there's many of you have been in that position. Maybe there's some of you who are in that position right now. You're faced with a decision, you don't know what to do, and you're happy to do whatever it is if you only knew what the Lord's will was. That's been my portion numerous times. And in the times in my life when I have followed through and have been answering to what I know, what the will of God is in my life, and there are many places that say, this is the will of God, this is the will of God, this is the will of God. If we're doing those things, when we come to a point where there's a fork in the road and we don't know what to do, the Lord can far better help us with that answer than if we're not doing those things that we know to be true. What did this young man do? I don't know. Let's go on. 2 Samuel chapter 2. Second Samuel chapter 2. Here's this struggle. David was anointed 3 times. But here there's a struggle between the house of Saul and the house of David. There's a battle, senseless battle. Just picture Abner and Joab saying, let the young man play before us, and you get 12 young men here, and they each take each other by the beard and they run themselves through with their swords, senseless deaths. And then there's this chase that goes on. We're going to pick up here. I want to look at Asahel in verse 18 of 2 Samuel chapter 2. And there were 3 sons of Zeruiah there, Joab, Abishai, Asahel. Asahel was of light of foot as a wild roe. And Asahel pursued after Abner, and in going he turned not to the right hand or to the left from following Abner. And Abner looked behind him and said, Art thou Asahel? And he answered, I am. And Abner said unto him, Turn thee aside to the right hand or to the left, and lay hold on one of the young men, and take his armor. And Asahel would not turn aside from following him. And Abner said again to Asahel, Turn thee aside from following me. Wherefore should I smite thee to the ground? How then should I hold up my face to Joab thy brother? Howbeit he refused to turn aside. Therefore Abner, with the hinder end of his spear, smote him under the 5th rib. The spear came out behind him, and he fell down there and died in the same place. And it came to pass, as many as came to the place where Asahel fell down and died, stood still. You just think of this senseless death of this young man. You know, Asahel was one of the mighty men of David, if you read. But just think of this, and you might say in a certain sense that he died for the cause of David. But just think of this senseless death, and think of the people coming alongside. And it says they stood still. They just looked. You have that expression numerous times in the Word, they stood still. But here, you think of the people just thinking, this man was warned. He was warned twice. You think of Peter and how he was warned with that cock crow. You know, before there's an event in our life, there's always a warning. Asahel had a warning there. Think of the people standing there and standing still and looking at Asahel. And young person, if you can learn from your own mistakes and learn also from the mistakes of others, it's a great blessing. I did something just a few months ago. I went to Fellowship Lord's Day in Montreal. It's about a 3-hour drive from where I am. There was supposed to be snow that day, a heavy snow, and so I left early. Well, I drove 2.5 hours, and there was no snow. So I got to Montreal a lot earlier than I thought I was going to. I thought I have this extra time. I'm going to go to my old high school. Hadn't been there for a long time, very long time. Graduated 50 plus years before. I went in a certain part of the parking lot. Hadn't been there for 50 plus years. I sat there in the car in my high school, looked at that high school, and I just reflected on all the ways that my life could have gone, and the mercies of the Lord in preserving me despite failure after failure after failure. I sat there, I thought, wow, the Lord is so merciful. I sat there and I reflected, just like these ones were looking at Asahel. I'm sure they were looking at him thinking, why didn't he listen? But he didn't. Oh, young person, if you have warnings, may you too listen. And may you learn from your own mistakes, but learn also from the mistakes of others. I see our time has evaporated. Let's look at one more. Let's go over to the 18th chapter. 2 Samuel 18. A sad time in David's life. Absalom is slain. He doesn't know about it yet. And there's this man, Ahimaaz. Verse 19. Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok. Then said Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, let me now run and bear the king tidings, how that the Lord hath avenged him of his enemies. And Joab said unto him, thou shalt not bear tidings this day, but thou shalt bear tidings another day. But this day thou shalt bear no tidings, because the king's son is dead. Then said Joab to Cushai, go tell the king what thou hast seen. And Cushai bowed himself unto Joab and ran. Then said Ahimaaz the son of Zadok yet again to Joab, but howsoever, let me, I pray thee, run also after Cushai. And Joab said, wherefore wilt thou run, my son, seeing that thou hast no tidings ready? But howbeit, he said, let me run. Says it the third time. Finally Joab says, you can go. And he said unto him, run. And Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain and overran Cushai. Verse 29, the king said, "Is the young man Absalom safe?" He says this unto Ahimaaz. Ahimaaz answered, when Joab sent the king's servant, "And me thy servant, I saw a great tumult, but I knew not what it was." And the king said unto him, "Turn aside and stand here." And he turned aside and stood still. You know, Ahimaaz here, he ran, thinking he had a message. And he had no message. I'm going to make a plea particularly to those here who are young men. You're here for the Lord. You're called upon sometimes to take the gospel. You're called upon sometimes to share something in a reading. Perhaps you have something laid on your heart to share. I'm going to share something that my dad shared with me when I was a young person. My dad said to me, "Dave, when you speak, make sure you have a point. Make sure you have a point." You know, Ahimaaz ran. He had nothing to say. Nothing at all. There's been times when I've spoken and I've had no point. It's embarrassing to speak, and the brethren go away and think, "What was that all about?" Or sometimes we say that about a message that we've heard. I would encourage you young men, if the Lord encourages you to say something, then do it. Don't quench the Spirit. But don't also be like Ahimaaz here and grieve the Spirit if you go ahead and say something and you've got nothing to say. And I would encourage you too to go through the Acts of the Apostles and notice how they preached. Notice that I would encourage you, if you're called upon to share the gospel, don't stand there and share the gospel with your hands in your pockets. Don't do that. If you go through the Acts, you see the Apostle Paul, and it says he put forth his hand. There was enthusiasm as the good seed was presented. And I would encourage you, dear young ones, to, when you share something, to have meditated upon it, to have enjoyed it, and to put it forth with enthusiasm. Here's a man, he had no message, nothing whatsoever. And that's been my portion too on many times. Well, our time's up. Just on reflecting, we looked at Daniel. We looked at Secundus. We looked at a man who needed that chair, not Secundus, who was happy to take this chair. Had all the characteristics of the man that had this chair, but he didn't need that chair. Oh, particularly those of you who are A-types that have all the energy to face whatever, to have it tenored by this man, Secundus. To think of Eliab and how David didn't hold a grudge against his brother. To think of Shimei and how he did say he had sinned. But there may be in that lifetime of ours that it be characterized by repentance. As we saw that brother that went and spoke to these two sisters. Then we saw the time when David was going and he went to Nob. And the word there was concerning the young men, that their vessels would be holy. Oh, that it would be so. We saw the lad, and we saw that there was a time appointed. We saw David's, that young man at first, that we first spoke about in the early part of 1 Samuel, who saw the characteristics of David, and that you would be exercised to choose your friends wisely and well. And we saw Asahel, who died needlessly, and then Ahimaaz that had no message. May these things help us.